Yi Chong's pupil shrunk on a whim. Time to accelerate. Yi Chong's hands hovered over the control panel like a shroud of phantasm. The F-58 that acted goofy before had advanced in an overpowering speed towards Carl. As if it were on drugs, it charged with spear-dazzling ferocity. The pilot and Carl saw his fear becoming real gradually. The cold shine of death magnified in his quivering eyes. He was saved by the instinct he obtained from intensive training in the past, as he set his shield to the front immediately to protect him and his partner from fatal damages at any cost. There was scarcely time for him to collect his thoughts. His sense of protection just held his teammate up within his mech's right arm. A man who could still be thinking of his own mates at such a situation. Yi Chong was impressed. Heading towards the iron wall in no time, Yi Chong did not seem to be decelerating at all. A slide tilted and Yi Chong skied over the surface of the shield so smoothly as if the shield was lubricated. Carl, who was behind the shield, was confused. The expected crash was not coming anytime soon. There was no pressure exerted onto the shield and the hands felt too light for an incoming collision. Huh. A shadow came to the right of Carl. The slow giant was horrified. He could not manage to shift his heavy shield in time. He lifted his elbow towards himself from the strike. Hawkeye was too absorbed being the watchdog that the pilot only found the existence of the loophole by then. The raider had already sneaked through the iron shield. Hawkeye sent off an emergency signal right away. But there was no response. Hope had been sunken in the pilot of Hawkeye. Apparently his other mates were done for as well. No one could reach them. The raider must have planned thoroughly for this attack. Such resourcefulness. The thought sent chills down his spine, from the bottom right to the top of his head. He shuddered unwillingly. He gestured at Carl to call for cover up on his escape. He would be running away at maximum speed as he believed he must stay alive to spread the words to the other grunts at the very least. He switched his engine on. Wham! He didn't make it. Before he wanted to make his next move, he felt as if he was crashed by a speeding mech. The agony in his body terrorized his remaining muscles. He shrieked, seeing half of his body chopped off like hay in a cutter, blood spilling over the weapon like a gruesome graffiti. His head leaned to the side as he lost his consciousness, which seemed to be never retrieved afterwards. Back when Carl arched his arm, F-58 took it like a lever and launched itself to the air. One somersault and the rarely used shield was finally put into use this time. The impact created from F-58's leap disabled Carl's movement temporarily. F-58 stomped on the ground landing and he swiftly sent the shield flying with a fling he made. The shield spun through the gap between Carl and the iron shield, all the way to the running Hawkeye. A critical hit. The edges of the compound metal shield were extremely honed, plus it flew under the immense strength of F-58's toss. The damage was greater than ever, especially when Hawkeye's armor was pathetically weak. The shield pierced through completely like a slice to the apple. Crackles and splutters. The Hawkeye exploded. Having to witness the entire scene, the mechs that happened to be passing by in the air were horrified and nearly lost control. There was no more need to keep it down anymore. Yi Chong activated his magnetic sword, wanting to end the battle quickly and flee. Carl had not been making any movement since then, seemingly too astonished by the sudden explosion before him that he did not notice the approaching F-58. Well, aren't you prepared to die when you are prepared to daze off at such timing? Yi Chong could imagine Carl already dead in his mind as he waved his magnetic sword like a ferocious serpent as its sting inched towards Carl for a deadly kiss. Yi Chong. A white light blinded Yi Chong as he heard Mew warning, "Look out." Carl actually self-destructed. The explosion blew Yi Chong off far away. In a bewilderment, his eyes set upon the tiny dot in the sky. No. It wasn't a suicide. He enlarged the image obtained in the processor. Damn it. That was the white mech going after him last time. Yi Chong could not stop cursing, but it was not the time for that. The F-58 reached his hands for the ground to stabilize his balance. Bang. He dodged in a tumble right away. I knew it. The attack had yet to be ended as another beam of light struck right before Yi Chong. The F-58 then set close to the floor and zigzagged to the rooftop as he picked up the shield on the way. The frisbee would come in real handy now. He got to the top and jumped off from the building of 500 floors tall. The white mech chased behind, showing determination in getting Yi Chong real nailed this time. Damn it. Damn it. Yi Chong called himself in such bad luck of encountering this white mech at this very moment of all times they could have met. He set himself off into the urban jungle, weaving in between the buildings. That would have worked in the past. However, the white mech seemed to be going real in the hunt. The worst part of the scenario was it would appear that the white mech was aided by the police forces. The color blue, black and white were the typical colors for police officers' mechs, and none of theirs were of low quality. Most of the mechs were either average or advanced. Under the assistance of police force, they cornered Yi Chong bit by bit. What could Yi Chong have done? Agitation seared his head. Puzzlement wet his face. Mew. The communicator of F-58 rang with a familiar voice. I'm Johansson, do you hear me? Yi Chong would love to respond, but no time for words. There's a turning 100 meters in front of you. Meet there. And he hung up. Gosh. Yi Chong's heart skipped a beat. So the Black Cove are finally getting their hands into this. He settled his mind and sped up straight. 100 meters were a brief distance to Yi Chong's speed. Any place in that distance was not far-fetched to reach within a blink of an eye. Yi Chong's eyes focused on that very black mech as soon as he arrived. This must be the war model of the Black Cove. That was the first time Yi Chong saw the exact machinery limited to the black covers right before his eyes. He had heard amazing stories about it, but I've never seen it till today. The only impression flooding his thought then was, this is the coolest mech I've ever seen. Hideous. That would be the lasting impression given to every person who had seen this mech. The well-proportioned body glossed in a dreamy darkness, a color inhibited the bloodthirsty will in it, the hooks on the slender wrists, elbows, shoulders, knees and the head flashed like the fangs of the demon lord debuting from the underworld, the scepter about a meter half at the right arm, along with the chains wrapped over which the endings were kept inside the mech, wondering what it actually could do. A magnetic sword kept at the crossing of its back. Came in a pair, about 3 meters long each. The arm guard on its left was rather easily overlooked, which could be pretty good considering what the mech was made for. The sharp edges were hidden within the coat of black paint. The ulterior of the legs had the same pair of scepters too, with the rising spikes installed at the heels. Well, for the hidden firepower, I couldn't tell how many shooting cartridges he hid. 5. Enlightened Mew, 5 cartridges were hidden. An absolute killer machine. Yi Chong could not stop complimenting the machinery in his mind. Imagine with such firepower, combined with Johansson's rapid attacking skills, the destruction this mech could potentially create would be more than overwhelming. The apparent setup must not be it. There had to be more, considering it a mech from the Black Cove. It should have some other fearsome modifications not known by a glance. Terrifying. Unpredictable. Yi Chong shifted his view onto his own F-58. It was at the other extreme on a scale with the black mech. It just felt so half-baked in comparison with Johansson's war machine. If he were to have a duel with Johansson in a F-58, no matter how much more skillful he was than Johansson, he would lose inevitably. Those men are from the association. Johansson spoke gravely, and we are finishing them right here, together. As planned, both of them took the sides of the crossing each. Hiding in darkness, Yi Chong tried to piece everything together in his mind. Association. Did he mean the FMPA? Wait, so the FMPA is actually the nemesis of Black Cove. Ever since he got out of the Black Cove, Yi Chong showed disdain towards the certification system in FMPA. The pilots certified by the so-called Association of the Galaxy could hardly be called potent. Nevertheless, he never expected the day that he would be dumbfounded by someone from the FMPA. The super advanced mechs that have been hunting me were all from the FMPA. The pilot inside that white mech might be inferior to Yi Chong's skills but was still way above the average advanced pilots holding fancy certificates in the field. How would the Black Cove become the enemy to the FMPA? It did not make sense to Yi Chong. Here it comes. Johansson boomed. Everything happened so fast, Yi Chong simply did not have the leisure to go through the scenes again. The white mech gracefully emerged in the crossing at first, which the grace was lost upon seeing 2 mechs at the crossing awaiting for its arrival. The white mech appeared to have flinched seeing Johansson's fearsome machine. Do it. Johansson shouted and pounced at the white mech straight away. The speed was unlooked for to the white mech as it went easily a stage faster than F-58. The white mech calmed down fairly quick and backed off with dexterity, a strange-looking gun in the hand aiming at Johansson. You. Johansson's angry voice ran deep and profound. Yi Chong backed away, absconding from the scene. It's now or never. Yi Chong might have seemed foolish for not understanding the bread and butter of routine in humanity, although he was not utterly foolish. He snorted. He knew the situation well enough. If the white mech was ever annihilated, he would be the next target in Johansson's eyes and would not stand a chance to even grapple. Thinking back about what had happened at the Black Cove, Yi Chong could smell the distinct danger in the air. His intuition was justified by Mew's analysis, which suggested Johansson showing a hidden enmity. Well then, why should I stay back and be skewed when I can run? If only I have a proper mech, I would have. Heh. Yi Chong felt dejected for his helplessness. A stab for Johansson as a farewell gift. Yi Chong's mischievous mind feared the idea. Judging by the tone when Johansson spoke to him, anyone could have guessed Johansson's intention of dragging him back to the Black Cove. Johansson did not seem to be keen at murder. However, if only the white mech remained and Johansson actually wanted to get rid of him, it would be the same old bad ending he imagined in his mind. Yi Chong backed out right when Johansson shouted to initiate the attack, which left Johansson stupefied after pouncing at the white mech. "Why you little," said Johansson angrily, yet he had better things to worry about, like his own safety. The white mech pointed the gun at Johansson. Yi Chong did not seem bothered because he was not aware of what that strange-looking gun in the white mech's hand was. Nonetheless, it was not the same for Johansson. He recognized the gun since he had been infiltrating the FMPA database the moment he got his own war machine. He had read through the profiles of his nemesis. The white mech is known elegantly as the Messenger. As angelic as it may sound, it is a commonly used unmodified mech among the aces of the FMPA. And that gun, known as Javelin Angel Phi, is the true original weapon used by the experts in the association, named after the semicircle curving over the body like wings, glossing in fair pearl white like an angel. It looks more like an art than a killing weapon. A .20 caliber gun might seem too minuscule to do anything to a mech of 10 meters tall. However, the caliber does not matter, but what it fires does. It would be a total different outcome providing that if it fires nano waves. Calculated based on the Thomson's law, the nano waves could effortlessly devastate the whole 50-story building at the maximum capacity of the gun. Given by how there was never a let-up from the FMPA, one could already imagine how powerful the gun could be. Johansson fed. He displayed no fright. His eyes were cold. The archival held more than just a grudge towards each other. If the Black Cove never played dirty, it would have been long wiped. Johansson recognized the situation. With Black Cove strength, it shall never be wiped out for real. Though it was a bit unacceptable for Johansson that the FMPA could put up with the Black Cove for this long. Johansson placed the arm shield before his chest. Zzz. A layer of strange rays started emitting from his dark shield and shrouded Johansson's body in plasma, which shaped like a slightly dented shield over him and his cosmic flare. He then got onto his black mech, the cosmic flare. Johansson moved evasively. Even though he was much slower than Yi Chong in terms of steering, the impressive cosmic flare covered up the holes, thus making Johansson a much better driver than Yi Chong on his underdeveloped F-58. He did not assume that such little trick could chase the enemy away, and of course he was not that dumb to assume that would evade them either. The Messenger possessed an impeccable lock-on system that aided less skillful pilots to nail the hit by halving duration of the entire input sequence using its automatic and guided lock-on function, which would only sacrifice negligible quantity of accuracy in exchange. A ray of scorching lilac glared towards Johansson. The transparent plasma shield shook violently for a moment. "I knew it. That has to be the nano waves fired from Javelin Angel 5. The shield stabilized quickly. However, to Johansson's horror, he noticed the sharp drop of the battery after the first strike. Fortunately, it was also exhausting for Javelin Angel 5 to sustain the firepower, if the info obtained was accurate, that is. The possibility of dodging the next attack was meager enough to encourage Johansson to just advance forward fearlessly under his plasma shield. As soon as I get close enough, I could finish this guy off in one blow. He traveled towards the enemy, disregarding the possibly massive damage coming at him. This was the typical brawl between members of FMPA and Black Cove. The Black Covers maintained movements that were more complicated, more depleting with their enhanced physique and dexterity of their hands to complete the input, the archetypal Black Covers, while the FMPA pilots would pull punches with the more avant-garde and automated machineries made out of their flawless craftsmanship to remedy their physical fragility, the classic FMPA members. The pilots from the Black Cove were known for their combative skills, so one could picture the otherworldly strength in close combats with the Black Covers. The technology at the Black Cove might be seemingly incompetent compared to the FMPA, but that did not mean they were outdated. The mechs used in Black Cove were contrarily in a status quo of the leading position when put into comparison with the unmodified mechs in the current market, which makes them ultimately unique in combats, for they were those who combined potent pilots and mechs along with bizarre weaponry. Since the mechs used by the Black Covers were already known to be prime, then the more developed mech technology at the FMPA had to be the greatest. The most sophisticated processor, the most inventive engines, the most pioneering choice of materials, the most innovative mech designs, and together they formed the most groundbreaking mech in the galaxy. Intellectualization of mech was the breakthrough they achieved, where they were possible to make the best decision in a presented scenario within an extremely brief period of time under the assistance of the processor installed. Moreover, they had also created the top ranged weapons with dazzling variety and compelling forces, hence their style of ranged attacks with high mobility was determined. And that meant the messenger would be in hot water any moment soon. Johansson charged and had already aimed the possible alley the messenger could have blinked to if it were to escape, which certainly led to his victory in the end. It could have been a perfect victory if Yi Chong did not surprise him with that last-minute runaway, in which the messenger could have escaped back then. Yi Chong was scurrying from the scene on his mech. There was no way he would turn back now. All engines, maximum speed. He zigzagged through the buildings, trying to hide himself within the ground, though he knew it well that the two big machines could have been too busy fighting each other dead or alive to even care about Yi Chong. It was rather delightful to have lost that white mech. Without that white mech escorting, the police mechs were no longer an issue. A turn here and a spin there, a leap and a sink, through that alley and over the fence, he finally left the proximity of police forces. Yi Chong went on flying calmly. His mech was too eye-catching. Yi Chong thought it through, wondering if there were more of those white mechs going after him. As for his appearance, only Johansson knew, so he probably would not be identified. Thanks to Johansson who held the annoying mech for me, I can now go into hiding. Yi Chong was feeling smug. Oh well, sigh. Yi Chong thought back about beautifully crafted mech Johansson owned. With envy he lamented to Mew, how I wish I had that kind of mech, Mew. Well, according to calculations based on the data given, the chances are below 10%. Mew flatly analyzed. The heck, Mew, how did you even calculate that? Yi Chong was astonished. It's simple. It's based on the original mathematical model proposed by Austin, in conjunction with the combination of the fuzzy theory with multivariation probability, thus the possibility to calculate your case, Yi Chong. Sometimes I just wish you speak English, Mew. Yi Chong scratched his head, and I also wish you could be more sentimental. Sentimental means, of, or prompted by feelings of tenderness, sadness or nostalgia. Based on my reading, it is blatant that you do not possess such quality. A comeback from Mew. What? Yi Chong screamed in his mind, Mew, do you mean I am not sentimental? That is correct. Mew replied. Why you? In the midst of mutual teasing, Yi Chong heard someone calling from his back. Ever since Yi Chong met Mew, his usual mumbo-jumbo had gradually reduced. He had been communicating with Mew through telepathy. To the people around, he no longer appeared to be muttering to himself, instead, he stayed all quiet. Yi Chong turned over towards the direction of the voice calling. It was Sun Xulin and Shou coming towards him along with 3 other young men. A glance through the gang, his eyes identified the uniqueness of the man in the center, who seemed to be the eldest as he walked in a fairly steady and mature manner. While the man on his right was a bit more buffed, apparently someone who had undergone a certain kind of special training. Though he had unevenly flexible-looking limbs, he still did not look fluid enough, which indicated that he would have issues mastering the control of his strength. The other on the left was much more undersized, or even puny, but he did have a nice pair of hands which gave Yi Chong an impression being quite nimble. Yi Chong's careful observation on a person always started with the person's behavior, the physique then tiny details like their gestures. Contrary to the norms, he did not show concern of one's facial appearance. Hemph. Xulin's face was all puffy and steaming as she stood at the side turning her face away from Yi Chong while Shou, her cousin, pulled Xulin's sleeve, signaling her to behave. Greetings, mister. The leading man smiled kindly as he initiated, you must be that very Yi Miss Xulin had mentioned. Allow me to introduce myself, I am Yangin and we had heard about your amazing skills from Miss Xulin. We certainly appreciate your accommodating nature willing to assist Miss Xulin repairing her mech. So regarding the price you had offered before, we accept it wholeheartedly. Would you mind, by all means, to join our establishment? Yi Chong's mind was clogged with the long-winded introduction. Oh. He got what the man meant, they are paying. Okay, good. He spoke on. Yi Chong was acting nonchalantly toward such a lovely offer, but the leader Yang and did not seem to mind the attitude at all, so let me carry on introducing my men. This is Kei-Han, the pilot of our group. And this is Ding Yining, our ace student from the mechanic school, who is very familiar with mech modification and would be providing you assistance. Kei-Han was trying to be friendly at first, but Yi Chong's indifference was enraging to him. It was not really because of Yi Chong putting up an attitude, but rather because Yi Chong appeared to be too engaged chatting with Mew in his mind to bother what Yang spoke. Based on the data I had received, Johansson has about 87% chance of achieving victory in that fight against the white mech. The white mech on the other hand has measly 10% success rate of escaping and 3% chance of winning, reported Mew flatly. Well, that sounds like Johansson had won the fight. Yi Chong was confident that he could have won if he were to pilot Johansson's mech, considering how even Johansson could win in the end. Suddenly a number of mechs soared through the sky in lightning speed, which created an airflow against the sleeves of people on the ground. Yichang lifted his head and nearly got a heart attack because those happened to be the exact same white mech he had encountered before. Johansson must have defeated the white mech, so the ally came to the rescue. Yichang counted the number of white mechs in his mind. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Hehehe, Johansson is in trouble. While Yang and continued blabbering things, Yichang did not bother. Keihan's impression towards Yichang had just taken a turn to the worse. He glared on, hoping that Yichang would realize his ill manner. But well, even if Yichang did notice his attitude, he would not repent for his ill manner too. Yang seemed to be also a little agitated in his eyes. He retained his smile as he spoke on, very well. Maybe we should try on working something now, just to break the ice. How about that? Mr. Yichang shifted his focus back to the conversation. Okay, sure, knowing that the person still wanted to test him out despite all those unnecessary respects and act. They got onto their transportation and moved to the base. It was a giant storage with all sorts of parts and tools for mech of different models. It was so messy that the tools looked as if they were suffocating. The weakling Yining rubbed his palms in slight embarrassment. Haha, I'm sorry. This place is a little messy sometimes. I usually work alone here, so I don't really do cleanups. Yichang took a glance at the parts scattered on the ground. From the moment he had seen that black mech from Black Cove and the white mech from FMPA, he no longer fancied these ordinary mechs stuck in the storage. Any advanced mech even like the F-58 would have looked modest in front of the mighty Black Cove gears, let alone that super overpowered war machines Johansson drove and that messenger the FMPA pilot sniped with. He could not find a good reason himself to explain the vast difference of quality between the so-called advanced mech sold in the market and the real deal in Black Cove and FMPA. Who are the Black Cove and FMPA seriously? Questions of different kinds mushroomed in Yichang's thoughts. But, well, there is a time and place for everything, but not now. So, what kind of mechs do you guys need? Yichang asked. Speed. All speed. We only need speed. Well, of course, it would be better if we get some mobility. Keihan stepped to the front and replied excitingly. Such requirement actually reminded Yichang of that blue paperweight he had a race with in the street back then. That bottlehead setting. What about firepower? Nope. Keihan shook his head. Does not require. What about defense? Nope. Keihan shook his head again. I only want speed. What I want is a mech specialized for races. Sounds like that blue paper mech I met last time. But for Pete's sake, what the heck can that kind of mech do? Run. Yichang wanted to question Keihan's concept, but he was too lazy for a fruitless discussion. Since the employer asked for a racing mech, he would give him a racing mech. He then inquired this future pilot of the mech regarding some essential factors to be taken into consideration for designs, including height, weight, habits of controlling, optimum speed of his hands, and so on. Yichang nodded his brows while conversing with Keihan, and sometimes he went dazed. He walked to and fro performing calculations and simulations on the processor in the storage. It lasted for 30 minutes, and right when the people started to get impatient, Yichang finally came up with the ultimate modification plan. Yining took a look at Yichang's blueprint, and out of sudden, the eyes lustered with desire as well as amazement, like a famished wolf spotting a fat lamb in the field. Perfect, this is too perfect. Oh my gosh. You are a genius. Yining could not stop exclaiming as his eyes fixed on Yichang with adore. Yining even felt like kneeling down and pleading Yichang to be his master. But there was no time for that. The next thing Yining did was storming into the mountain of parts to obtain those mentioned in Yichang's plan at full speed. Yining rushed in and out madly. Apparently, the owner of this storage, Yining, also happened to be a mech maniac. Thankfully, Yining's storage had all the things Yichang would need in building this mech. Or else, he could not swear that he would make it. There were a variety of tools and strange parts scattered around in the storage. Yichang could barely recognize most of the tools. Frankly speaking, some of them also happened to be his first encounter. There was no way he could use those tools. But then, it did not mean that there was nobody else who could use the tools for him. The owner Yining knew the place and the tools well enough. Plus, Yining was all proactive and passionate. Yichang could just sit aside, point his fingers around and watch things happen. Yichang would be informing the materials and the parts needed, along with specific ways of modifying certain parts, while Yining did all the work. Literally, Yichang was being the contractor of this construction. Yining's skill was aided with odd gadgets and carried out with full efficiency and effectiveness, which was an eye-opener to Yichang. He observed Yining carefully and learned the tricks bit by bit with heart. After approximately 4 hours of hard work on building the new machines, they eventually got to the grand opening of a newborn mech. The moment had arrived. A newborn mech was to be sent into the sky soaring like a bird, freely, and, when everyone saw the post-modification, their eyes were filled with confusion, looking at Yi Chong. Yining, who had been working hard for the past hours, went dumbfounded upon seeing the mech he modified with his own hands looking like this. Is this crap still a mech? This was probably what everyone else had in mind. The mech was in the shape of an arrow, with a tapering body from cabin to the end. The body was much narrower than before, but taller, like a flattened swordfish. While the main engine was shifted to the very end. It was all according to Yi Chong's calculation, where the placement of center of gravity would be ideal. The front was the arrowhead with the side wings forming a V shape towards the fore, unlike before when it used to be a flimsy metallic strip and multiple additional engines were installed to promote a larger scope of redirection. The design was an innovation but also a challenge to the pilot, as the cabin had been moved to the body of the mech, the shaft where it only offered limited space for body movement, just enough to fit Kei-han sitting in. No wonder Yi Chong asked him about the height and the weight. Also, as the entire cabin had become cramped, the processor was replaced with a much smaller one which served less functions. Technically, if it was a mech made for Yi Chong, he would hardly need a processor and could just play manually. But Yining was the one strongly against this because a mech was believed to be worthless without a processor inside. The mech was mainly built using light titanium alloy, which durability might appeared substandard, but it served better for its featherweight. The engine used was Firebird 3, and it was not because of its dynamic, rather, again, it was because of its weight being merely half of the other engines of similar grades, and most importantly it offered the largest scope of redirection in the group. Most of the main engines only served the purpose of providing momentum to the mech, and it wholly depended on the additional engines to make direction changes. However, there happened to be some rare kinds that could do both, though they offer a smaller scope of redirection. Firebird 3 from this category was the most outstanding in direction control, being a main engine, thus it became Yi Chong's choice. Of course, such an overpowered sounding engine was not a common selection by the public, for it consumed high amount of energy. It might have half of the weight of engines of similar grade, but in return it had twice the amount of energy depletion as the other engines in its line, which drastically restrained its application. For instance, the mech Yi Chong designed could sustain a non-stop flight for a limited duration of 8 hours when fully charged at most. Such a flaw Yi Chong thought it was that he asked Kei-han for opinion, but he did not show much disagreement considering how he was only required a 2-hour flight in the tournament. That was more than enough. Yining proceeded to paint the whole mech in blue, a blue like a pool of clear lake. The strange design did actually made the mech look much more striking, forceful with its hollowed body. The team was looking forward to its performance. They looked at each other and nodded. Somehow they read each other pretty well. They agreed the fact that it was their first time seeing such an odd mech. It would be more appropriate to call it an aircraft instead. Kei-han was thrilled to try on his new toy that he felt like hopping into the cabin right away. Up, and away. Kei-han set off into the sky. For moments on ground, they had been anticipating Kei-han's return to hear his words about the new craft. Kei-han finally made it back, literally made it back. It was not as heartwarming as coming home because Kei-han crawled out of his cabin with his face drained, his legs shaking. Hi, folks. They quickly went to Kei-han. Han. Yang and asked hurriedly, what's wrong? Too fast. This is intense. He caught his breath, settled his mind. There were a few times I nearly crashed into people. It's too hard to control. But he seemed all pumped and enthusiastic. Still, it's too fast. I guess I could already be a professional racer at this rate. It's too fun. Xulin, who was standing at the side, seemed quite eager to try while Shou acted a scaredy cat, holding Xulin back at her sleeve. Yining gazed endearingly at the mech he made out with his own hands. He mumbled. What name shall we bestow this baby? Glitty. Kei-han waddled to Yining. How about Glitty? Glitty just sounds stupid. Xulin shook her head in strong disapproval. A single word name never worked. How about Gliding Joy? It was a suggestion coming from a beauty, and without a doubt, Kei-han approved, and Yining seemed pleased with the name too. How about Yi Chong? The designer, the contractor of the construction, carried on watching the folks uninterestedly, guessing the man did not bother what the mech would be named after. And so be it. The name of this modified mech had been decided among the folks without much discussion. Well. Yi Chong looked at the time. It was time to scram for him. He stood up and spoke to Yang Yen. 4 hours in total. Every hour costed you 1,225 swan. That'd be 5,000 won in total. Payment at your convenience. His tone was monotonous. He did not sound mortified as he asked for his pay. Titch. Gazulin spat her tongue in disdain and dragged Shou aside. On the other hand, Yang acted truly easygoing in this. He paid Yi Chong the price as he acknowledged his capability, knowing if he joined the alliance, the team would have greater odds to win. Yining carried on gazing at Yi Chong's blueprint in endearment, while Keihan's eyes still glued at gliding joy. His hands could not stop fondling his baby from the tip to the end, the shaft and then the wings. Gazulin was having another private conversation with Shou at the corner. Their whispers rumbled. Yi Chong seemed to have heard his name being mentioned in their discussion, but well, do I really care? These two are just a bunch of weird people. I don't have time for them. He confirmed the transaction on his identity card. 5,000 swans in. Done. He briefly bade farewell to them and walked away after that. Back to the street seeing the crowd, Yi Chong then realized it was actually the peak hour of his noodle shop. That was more frightening than anything else. He got to get back to Grandpa Qian or the loss would be beyond estimation. He ran, dashed, hurtled and sprinted through the streets, like a fired bullet through the air. The pedestrians saw a shadow flying by and they panicked just to see nothing. Most of them thought they were just feeling a little under the weather. Yi Chong hurried back to the shop and indeed it was swarmed with customers. Grandpa Qian was running back and forth, looking really fatigued. Yi Chong, with a slight guilt, greeted Grandpa Qian and rushed into the kitchen to begin his work. Grandpa Qian returned to the front desk and let go a sigh of relief. When the last batch of customers left at about 8 at night, they had dinner and hit the bed after a short good night to each other. Then nothing else happened. Except for Yi Chong. He locked his room and carefully took out the chip he pilfered from the dead man's building back then. The chip had only recorded worthless information about Grandpa Xu's whereabouts. Well, the only surprising discovery was from the identity cards he obtained from the men he killed, as Mu's immense processing ability located the background of these people. So they are from the Ji family? Yi Chong asked. Probably about 95% the likelihood according to the data acquired. Mu answered. That's just another way to say yes. Well then, why are the Ji on Grandpa Shu? He asked on. Mu then gave a brief introduction on Ji family's background. Yi Chong understood the entire scenario after that. It had to be because of the new theory from Grandpa Shu that they desired. That was why they tried all sorts of ways to get Grandpa Shu into their group. And obviously Grandpa Shu would not buy any of their dirty tricks. Practically, those tricks were not that dirty to Yi Chong, considering how he would have used a much dirtier trick if he were the JIS. Yet. It does not mean I am fine with what they have done to Grandpa Shu. Understanding does not translate approval, especially when he was involved. Well then, by now the Ji family should have heard of the news. Keeping that thought, he logged into the virtual world and left a note at the Aurora informing Grandpa Shu that he would be busy working on something and he might not be visiting anytime soon. The Ji family, huh? Yi Chong snickered. It was night, and Yi Chong moved silently like a spirit through the darkness. The night provided the best cover for Yi Chong. If it was in space, Yi Chong would not dare to move so freely, even with his F-58. While there was more radiation in space, the geography was less complicated. Scanning systems can be used to their full potential in such terrains. On the other hand, within the atmosphere, the various environments severely restricted the effective perimeter of the scanning system, besides significantly decreasing its accuracy. Most importantly, the government has strict rules regarding atmospheric scanning, such as allowed scanning frequencies, methods and so on. The fact was that the F-58, with its advanced anti-detection system, would be the best candidate for the task at hand, but Yi Chong was unsure if Johansson's mech had a special communication link with the F-58. Hence, he kept the F-58 undeployed. In fact, the best time to infiltrate the Ji family was immediately after he killed the surveillance team, and before the Ji family received the news. Now that the Ji family was informed, security would be tightened. However, his infiltration was planned entirely by Mu. When Yi Chong noticed that Mu had gathered a large amount of data about the Ji family, he made the rational decision of letting Mu plan for the infiltration. Yi Chong had absolute trust in Mu. Mu did not explain the details of their operation, but only calculated the probability of the final outcome. The probability of success was 72%, the probability of failure and successful retreat was 20%, and the probability of dying mid-operation was 8%. Yi Chong felt that attacking the Ji family now would not deal a big enough blow, since he was not exactly powerful, and would risk exposing himself. However, Mu had insisted on the operation, and Yi Chong believed that there must be a good reason behind it, for Mu would not do anything carelessly. Yichang carefully moved in the shadows as he always did when hunting on the trash planet. The mutants were far more alert than humans and had uniquely enhanced senses, such as an incredible sense of smell and, more generally, highly sensitive hearing. The most problematic for Yichang were mutants that could see infrared light. Multichromatic lightings illuminated the night as the gorgeous lights winked at each other. Seen from above, one would find it a mesmerizing sight. The superstars and holographic advertisements looked more enchanting than they were during the day. The safety lights from the mechs flying above made them look like a sprinkle of dancing fireflies. Yichang was not in the mood to appreciate the scene that would have been impossible on the trash planet. Within the shadows of the dark, he was now moving silently like a cold-blooded venomous snake. Yichang carefully kept himself concealed as he asked, "Mew, what are our objective for this operation?" "Don't keep me guessing." Mew lightly replied, "You'll know when it's time. Based on available information, the probability of you understanding then is 91%. Yichang nearly tripped at the mech's response. "Of course I'll know then. I meant now." Mew continued calmly, "Based on available information, there is still an 8% probability of you not understanding by then. As for now, I regret to inform you that my calculation results indicates that the probability of you guessing right is 0%. Yichang cursed to himself. "Damn it, Mew, are you saying I'm stupid?" Mew kept his cool. "Logically speaking, that is absolutely accurate. Underscore 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 underscore. Yichang carefully hid himself behind an artificial tree and examined the base closely. Every 15 minutes, a few small mechanical birds would fly over the area. Their bodies were equipped with amplified scanning devices that greatly increased the scanning perimeter and accuracy. However, Yichang managed to hide in a blind spot under Mew's guidance. Yichang asked, "Mew, what is this place?" Mew ignored him and said, You should be able to avoid detection with the F-58. Yichang acknowledged and deployed the F-58. Mew immediately spoke, "Hurry." Yichang was surprised at the mech's anxiety and dared not take his time. He slipped into the cabin quickly and immediately started the engines. As expected, the F-58 did not alert the other party's scanning system. Yichang was thinking of moving in a discreet manner forward, but Mew spoke up, "Fly straight ahead." Yichang hesitated, but quickly recovered and flew as directed. However, he found it strange that the people moving about the area seemed to ignore the F-58 or even outright waved at him as a greeting, and that was how he flew openly into the area. Yichang could not keep up with what was happening and failed to see the reason behind their actions. The people here put heavy trust in the base's scanning system and did not think that someone could enter without going through proper identification. Everyone thought that the F-58 was a mech from the base. However, Mew had no intention of explaining and only spoke lightly, "You now have only 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, Johansson will be here, and there's a 78% probability that he'll know your rough location." Yichang broke into a cold sweat. Mew ignored him and continued, "You must reach this area within 1 minute." The F-58's photon processor immediately produced holographic schematics for the base. At the northwest corner was a basement about 20 meters underground, overlaid with a bright red spot that was Yichang's destination. "Damn it, Mew, Yichang gave up with his cursing and promptly accelerated ahead. Mew was deliberately calm. Don't rush. At your speed, there's a 94% probability of reaching your destination." Yichang was greatly agitated when he heard that Johansson would arrive in 3 minutes. His first thought was to leave his mech and escape. Is this a joke? The two mechs are not even on the same level. I have 0 chance of winning. Not escaping. Do you want me to die? However, Mew's words seemed to be layered with some unfathomable meaning. While Yichang continued to curse Mew on the inside, he still flew ahead at top speed. In just 5 seconds, Yichang arrived directly above the basement. The horizontal metal alloy door was 100 meters wide and 30 meters tall, and it grew larger and larger in his vision. When Yichang was 50 meters away from the door, Mew suddenly spoke up, "Send out the identification signal." Yichang caught his breath at the order. Already his hands were moving at top speed without thinking. On Black Cove, Yi Chong's hands could move up to Mach 5.54 after breaking the bottleneck. His speed was reaching Mach 7, which was an astounding figure. However, even with his speed, Yi Chong nearly choked as he executed his new order that came without prior warning. Fortunately, Yi Chong managed an abrupt halt as the F-58 stopped just about 2 meters above the door. The identification signal was sent just before the mech came to a halt. As Yi Chong recovered himself, he was faced with another dilemma. Signaling the other party with an identification, isn't that suicidal? To his surprise, the alloy door began to slowly slide open, and beyond the door was absolutely complete darkness. Yi Chong slowly and carefully maneuvered the F-58 into the basement. The mech scanned the surroundings over and over at its maximum capacity as Yi Chong grew more and more tense. Why would Mew want me to come here? What is it here exactly that caught Mew's attention so much? Yi Chong was filled with questions, but dared not be distracted by them at the moment. Mew had no intention of explaining since the beginning, at least not until he reached the end of the operation. Yi Chong could not help but be excited. The peaceful days before this did not dull his yearning for battle. On the contrary, since he was accustomed to the cruel lifestyle on the trash planet, Yi Chong was uncomfortable with the peace, even as he tried his best to get used to the vastly different way of life. He could not change over a decade of his habits and lifestyle overnight. It's been ages since I had a real battle. Yi Chong could feel his blood boiling. Strictly speaking, Yi Chong was not exactly trigger happy as he had only battled to survive. However, battles had always made him excited. Perhaps there'll be a nasty fight today. The scanning system did not detect anyone around, and that surprised Yi Chong. This is obviously an important place, how could there be no one around? Besides, I just went through the door with a valid identification, how can that be? From the moment Yi Chong entered the door, Mew spoke in unprecedented urgency. In 30 seconds, reach the 11th level below by then. The 10 levels above it are now accessible with your identification. Keep the F-58, quickly. Yi Chong dared not hesitate, and slipped out of the F-58 at once. The mech was withdrawn into its alternate dimension before Yi Chong hit the ground. As his feet touched the ground, Yi Chong's legs moved with explosive strength, following the route that was shown on the schematics earlier by Mew. It was pitch black, and even Yi Chong's superior vision left him blinded. Yi Chong could only run forward based on his memory of the route. However, Mew did not correct him, and so he assumed that he remembered the route correctly. Suddenly, a sliver of light came into view ahead, a silver metallic door slid open from the center, and the opening was the source of brightness. Even as he was running, Yi Chong noticed the odd fact that the door seemed more like a wall from his side before it slid open. Mew must have did something with his identification. Beyond the door was a slope angled at 45 degrees, paved with anti-slip material. The slope went on for about 50 meters before connecting to a corridor that formed a T-junction. Yi Chong chose to go left without hesitation. There were many code-secured entrances along the way, but whenever Yi Chong approached them, the doors would open for him. This puzzled Yi Chong, but he knew that it was probably due to Mew's tricks. He would ask Mew when they get back home, as this was obviously not the time nor place for questions. Yi Chong felt like he had entered a space devoid of other human beings. However, he only remembered the route for the first 5 levels. The corridors were a web of complicated lefts and rights, and all the twists and turnings had made Yi Chong lost his sense of direction. Even as he was confused by the directions, Yi Chong still managed to feel awed by the designs used to prevent infiltration. It was a truly clever design. However, Mew's presence meant that the current obstacle did not stop Yi Chong from moving forward. Finally, he reached the 10th level. Yi Chong ran with all his might as Mew spoke up, "I need 10 seconds for the 11th level. Deploy me now." Mew's making his move. Yi Chong was surprised, but did as he was told. Mew appeared within the corridors in the next instant. Mew's large hull still managed to look light and agile in the narrow corridors, and Yi Chong could barely keep up with Mew as he sped up following him. Mew gave a few more orders to Yi Chong, and, in the blink of an eye, the two arrived before the door on the 11th level. This door was obviously different from the rest. While the 10 alloy doors before it were equipped with identification mechanisms, the current door on the 11th level was devoid of any devices, and Yi Chong was greatly startled by that fact. Mew stood before the alloy door of the 11th level, his bionic eyes were flashing in a frenzy. Yi Chong stood beside the door as Mew suggested, his legs slightly bent in preparation and his dagger in hand. Man and machine were silent throughout their maneuvers. As expected, after 10 seconds, the door slid open, and Yi Chong rushed through the opening between the door panels like a ghost and slipped through. There were 2 people beyond the door, as expected as well. Yi Chong thought to himself. Prepared for the encounter, Yi Chong slashed his dagger through the air like lightning. The two people beyond the door did not expect the door to suddenly open. Two dark flashes of movement filled their eyes in disbelief before their throats were marked with a thin slit of blood that spread quickly outwards. After a slight pause, a soft pop sounded, and blood sprayed from the throats of the two victims. The two guards watched Yichang with disbelief and slowly fell to the ground, silent throughout their final ordeal. The whole process was neatly and efficiently done. The two victims did not even manage to sound the alarm right beside them. The automatic alarm system was already disabled by Mew. Yichang and Mew did not waste any more time as they moved forward post-haste. They were greeted by a large roundish chamber over 100 meters across. In the center of the chamber, there were a few concentric silver rings on the floor. The rest of the chamber was filled with a variety of mechs. The mechs shined with an attractive luster, painted in enchanting, interweaving colors of bright silver, ocean blue, light emerald and fiery red. These mechs stood quietly in the chamber like silent soldiers, filling the chamber with a mysterious attractive quality. These were all rare and advanced level mechs, and some were even limited editions. There were many that Yichang had never even heard of, and his eyes glowed with yearning from his long deprivation of mechs. These were not just run-of-the-mill products. Some of the mechs had accessories gathered at their feet, and Yichang noticed with his keen eyes that many of them were top of the line. Could these mechs be the reason Mew brought him here? Yichang could not help but feel that something was wrong. While these mechs were advanced and top grade, they were still not as good as the F-58. The F-58 might look ugly and unwieldy, its performance was still above the mechs in the chamber. Black Cove's strength was truly admirable. How can you not notice that? It's impossible. Yichang immediately dismissed his undoubtedly silly idea. He looked towards Mew and saw the mech standing at the center of the concentric circles in the chamber, as his bionic eyes flashed wildly. Yichang paused at the sight. Could there be something to this place? As expected, after 15 seconds, Mew spoke hastily, quickly. Yichang promptly stepped onto the silver circles. Before he could steady himself, he felt the ground below him vanish, and Yichang staggered. Fortunately, he was sharp enough to grab hold onto Mew beside him in time, thus avoiding a fall. The silver concentric circles carried Yichang and Mew silently downwards. Yichang stared in bewilderment at the two huge mechs before him. The horizontally laid mechs were evidently just completed. Yichang could even detect the smell of volatile paint in the air. Support frames and stabilization structures were still in place at many different parts of the mechs. Of the two mechs, one was in a combination of dim blue and ivory white, while the other had alternating shades of bright red and glowing silver. Yichang's eyes glowed with interest. He knew immediately from experience that these two mechs were special. It seemed that there was still someone else with mech technology comparable to that of Black Cove and the MPA. Yichang couldn't help but marvel at the two machines. These two mechs were definitely not of lesser quality than Johansson's Black War mech or the MPA's White mech. Mew prompted him, choose one now, you only have 1 minute of designated time left. Yichang snapped out of his reverie and suppressed his overjoyed emotions. He did not have time to inspect the two mechs in detail, but Yichang slipped into the blue-white mech's cabin without hesitation. The red-silver mech came with a formidable shooting weapon, and Yichang knew from a glance that it was a mech with a long-range battle style. This was why he chose the blue-white mech. After all, that kind of battle style did not suit him well. Inside the cabin, the floor was still littered with debris. Yichang did not make time for a closer inspection, as he began performing the initial settings as fast as he could. The initial setup was complicated, and Yichang felt slightly daunted by the task, but immediately rejoiced at the fact that a more complicated initial setup process implied that the mech was more advanced. Yichang put on the helmet and focused on the various messages that appeared in his vision, wary of any distractions. Not that he was open to any form of distractions, since the messages on the holographic screen came pouring out like a waterfall. Yichang's vision was tested on a whole new level. His hands moved quickly across the control panel, casting illusory shadows of movement. As for Mew, the mech had picked up a strange-looking weapon that was laid beside the mech that Yichang slipped into. The weapon was similar to a lance from archaic times, but extended to a whole 15 meters, and was obviously made for the mech that Yichang chose. Like the mech, the weapon's dim blue was like the flowing ocean. The sharp protruding end of the lance had two crescent-shaped blades on its sides, which made the weapon look like an antiquated double-bit axe. The crescent blades curved slightly inwards near the tip of the lance, but bent outwards on the other end. The point where the blades meet the lance's central beam was a diamond-shaped ruby crystal. The central blade of the lance had a mysterious sheen that seemed to constantly evolve. Mew watched the tip of the lance closely, as though he held great interest in it. Ji Shengyan furrowed his brows at the massive confusion before him and could not help but let out a little sigh at the fact that his eldest brother was too caught up in his joy. Immediately after the two mechs were finished, his eldest brother had arranged for a celebration, and even managed to invite almost everyone there, leaving only two behind to guard the place. This was too ridiculous. Earlier, he had advised his brother to send a few more guards over, but his brother had impatiently waved him off. The underlings around him may not have said anything, but through his keen perception, Ji Shengyan sensed their shunning towards him, thinking that he was not understanding. A few days ago, members of the surveillance team for Old Shu were all killed. The perpetrator was still unidentified, and Ji Shengyan had a scolding from his old man for it. While he believed that the perpetrator was someone who had a close relationship with Old Shu, the elder man was a tough nut to crack, and a precious asset that could not afford to be shouted at or physically intimidated. His family's actions against Old Shu had alarmed some higher-ups, and so his old man had asked for him to halt his operations against Old Shu. Ah, forget it, it can't be helped. Ji Shengyan smiled wryly at himself. The people before him had all stayed at this secret base for at least 3 years. Now that they had succeeded, how can he deny them their festive mood? Ji Shengyan understood their feelings. Against the hostility they showed for him, he could only smile wryly back to himself. However, there should not be any problems, since the secret base had a state-of-the-art identification system. It would be a fool's errand to attempt to infiltrate the base without raising any alarms. Ji Shengyan could not help but mock his excessive worrying. He believed that no one present would also believe in the possibility of that happening. The Ji family was famous for photon processors, and also far ahead of any other aristocratic family in matters concerning photon processors. Besides, Ji Shengyan knew how much time his old man spent on the base, and the importance of the base in the Ji family. Besides, the project they were celebrating now was monumental. As the second son of the Ji family, Ji Shengyan felt similar pride for this family project. The 4 aristocratic families of fall. They'll all make way for the Ji family. Suddenly, the ground shook, everyone present for the celebration froze, and total silence descended on the area. Was it an earthquake? As everyone raised their suspicion. Earthquakes, the result of violent tectonic shifts, is no longer a natural phenomenon that threatens human safety. Even common building structures can withstand the strong vibrations from earthquakes, much less the exceptionally constructed secret base that housed the current celebration. The vibrations grew stronger, and seemed to be heading their way. The rumbling undertones gradually became louder and louder. Whatever was moving did so very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the crowd could sense that it was getting much closer to them. The rumbling sound was getting clearer, and everyone present began to panic. Yi Chong maneuvered his newly acquired mech, plunging through walls, making its own path through brute force. Yi Chong was very fond of the mech. The only thing that bothered him was its name, Harmony of the Winter Aria. It sounded weird, of course, but most importantly, the name was too long. For Yi Chong, who appreciated conciseness, the name was a little awkward for him. Yi Chong had fitted all the weaponry for the Harmony of the Winter Aria. As he sat in the cabin, he marveled at the mech specifications. However, this obviously was not the time for a detailed inspection. In 45 seconds, Yi Chong completed the initial setup, and in another 10 seconds, all the weapons intended for the mech and scattered around it were fitted. In those 55 seconds, Mew was searching in the secret basement. In only 20 seconds, Mew located his target. The mech took another 20 seconds to crack a safe hidden in a corner. As for identifying his exact objective amongst the other things kept within the safe, Mew took only half a second. The object seemed to be a mineral ore as large as 2 fists. The ore had a strange feel to it, its color seemed to be constantly evolving, an unrecognizable hue to the human eye. Mew decidedly tossed the ore into his cabin. Once Yi Chong was done with the initial setup, Mew asked to be returned to his alternate dimension. Yi Chong had no objections to the mech's wishes, his battles are his own. The most urgent difficulty for Yi Chong now was to find the mech's dimension keystone. Without it, the mech would be incomplete. If he could not keep the mech in its alternate dimension, even if he could escape the base, he would only be easy prey for the entire Ji family. Yi Chong was not so foolish as to think that he could single-handedly destroy the Ji family. Finding the Harmony of the Winter Aria's dimension keystone was his top and only priority. Dimension keystones and their corresponding mechs can interact within a certain distance. Yi Chong skillfully commanded the photon processor, attempting to locate Harmony's dimension keystone. A red dot glared back at him almost immediately on the holographic screen, while another blue dot indicated his location. Knowing the location of dimension keystone, Yi Chong made his move. Yi Chong's method was simple: fly straight ahead. The distance between 2 points is shortest in a straight line. With the direction decided, Yi Chong wielded the 15-meter lance as he broke through wall after wall, sturdy alloy walls, resilient walls, the lot of them as they all caved in easily under the archaic-looking lance of the Harmony of the Winter aria. Yi Chong closed his distance with the Dimension Keystone through this crude and straightforward method. He had seen no one in his path, and thought it was odd. Since no one had sounded the alarm even as he carelessly destroyed the base, Yi Chong believed it must be Mew who had destroyed the alarm system. As for the extent of Mew's damage to the system, Yi Chong would not have known. One last wall to go. Even as he was overjoyed with that fact, Yi Chong grew calm. Yi Chong took in a deep breath and, with a little hum and some dexterous manipulation of the controls, the Harmony of the Winter aria abruptly accelerated. The archaic blue lance swiped left, right and center as the wall before him crumbled into pieces, debris flying all over the place. Harmony swiftly broke through the last wall. As the massive machine made its way through the wall, all those present for the celebration were caught in surprise, staring at the machine. Was this not the Harmony of the Winter aria? In an instant, they all realized what was really happening, and all hell broke loose. Screams and loud cries filled the area as the crowd was thrown into a massive confusion, scurrying all over the place. Yi Chong ignored the people, for he had only one objective, which was the Harmony's Dimension Keystone. The highly accurate scanning system returned the exact location of the Dimension Keystone to Yi Chong. It was on a man, currently surrounded by 4 others. The man was holding a glass of red wine, staring at him in confusion. The holographic scanner swept through the man's body over and over, such that even the fat around his waist was clearly visible to Yi Chong. The Dimension Keystone was in his overcoat's left pocket. Yi Chong did not hesitate. He swiped the 15-meter lance against his opponents, and the men around his target were pushed out of the way. Harmony of the Winter aria lifted the man in the center with its left arm. The sound of shattering glass was heard as the man began to scream. Everyone present looked fearfully at the eldest young master of the G family, threatened by the intruder, but none could save him. They did not even understand how their trusted alarm system was compromised. However, a few of the sharper ones had already left to call for help. G family's eldest young master was lifted by Harmony, 3 meters from the ground. As the pilot's cabin slowly opened up, everyone stared intently at the opening, curious to know the identity of this reckless and fearless trespasser. A shadow flashed past, a blurred motion that the audience could not make out of, and Harmony of the Winter aria's pilot cabin closed shut again. Before the crowd could react, the eldest young master was casually tossed aside like a ragged sandbag. Yi Chong left the red-silverish Dimension Keystone behind. While he knew that was the keystone for the other red-silver mech that was beside the Harmony, it was apparent that he could not backtrack to retrieve the other mech. Keeping the extra Dimension Keystone might reveal his location sooner or later. While he was equally interested in the red-silver mech, it looked that the enemy had arrived. Johansson received the signal from Yi Chong's F-58 almost instantly. Mechs from Black Cove have a few unique ways of communication. Once the distance between two of them is less than 500 kilometers, they would automatically reach out to each other. Cosmic Flare zoomed in on the location of the F-58 rapidly. Had Yi Chong not removed an important photon return circuit earlier under Mew's advice, the duration would have been shorter. However, the signal was fleeting, and Johansson guessed that number 58 must have withdrawn the mech. Johansson slipped into the Cosmic Flare hastily. The higher-ups at Black Cove were deeply interested in number 58. While he had only spent a short time at Black Cove, his performance during training greatly exceeded the average ability and speed of progress. He was definitely one of the finest mech pilots trained by Black Cove, but most importantly, the Black Cove higher-ups believed that he still had plenty of room for improvement. These factors made for Black Cove's determination to keep him with them. Black Cove's intelligence network was also extensive, such that they managed to track down number 58, all the way to Blue Ocean. He had thought that finding number 58 would take a long time, but unexpectedly found his target battling against the MPA. He disapprovingly thought of the events, that white mech was not really that powerful. If number 58 did not suddenly retreat and distracted me, I would have finished him off. Moreover, that number 58 from Team F had battled against the MPA messenger with a training mech, what a foolish act. Black Cove's orders to Johansson was to bring him back. Of all the people back there, only he and Instructor Hack had seen number 58's real face. He thought of the way number 58's eyes glowed with a yearn for power that day, and was certain that once he could find his target, he would be able to complete his mission. This mission was worth a grand total of 50 Black Cove points. If he could succeed in this mission, his points would be enough for him to receive a higher level of training. The thought made him excited, his eyes burning with eagerness, and his fists clenched tightly until his joints cracked. If only I had the strength, then surely I could do it. Johansson felt his heart throb strongly, as though a lithe entered his sight. After a moment, he sobered up, but the thought of number 58's retreat disturbed him. Could it be that the man was no longer hungry for power? No matter what, he must not fail. If number 58 refused to follow me obediently, he. A look of promised destruction flitted past his face. Besides, based on the time, it should soon begin. The cosmic flare flew at close to Mach 7, and reaching the F-58 would not take more than half a minute. If not for the delay in identifying number 58's location, Johansson would have been standing right before number 58 right now. The black cosmic flare flew across the night sky like the god of death. The air current sped past the surface of the mech's black sword and barbs, shrieking terrifyingly. It should be here. Johansson scanned the ordinary-looking base before him. The photon processor had indicated that number 5 was right here. The cosmic flare floated midair above the base and began to repeatedly scan the area at maximum capacity. However, the F-58 signal was still undetected. Has number 58 entered the inner parts of the base, or has he left? Johansson hesitated for a moment before swooping downwards, passing by some mechs along the way. In Black Cove, all mechs kept a distance between themselves as a precaution against hostility. This has become one of Black Cove's unwritten rules. If you and another person got too close, the other party might mistake your intentions as hostile, and the next thing you know is seeing a fatal blow coming straight at you. Never let someone get close to you. This is Black Cove's special rule. However, once outside Black Cove, the rule became somewhat peculiar. Take the residents of Blue Ocean. The number of mechs here were vast, and if one is to fly past the throngs of mechs in the air every day, how can it be possible to maintain a distance with other mechs at all times? In the seconds that just passed, a few mechs had flew past him closely. The cosmic flare's anti-detection is better than the F-58's, and an average mech would not be aware of the mech's existence through its scanning system. If not for Johansson's active evasion, the cosmic flare would have crashed into more than a few mechs. This undoubtedly made Johansson, who had not traveled beyond Black Cove for a long time, very uncomfortable. Another mech was coming towards him. Based on its trajectory, impact was inevitable. The blue and white mech seemed to be of a newer design, and the archaic-looking lance in its hand surprised Johansson. Few mechs are equipped with such weapons, and weapons long forgotten in history such as the lance often required special techniques to be effective. Without special techniques, these weapons will be less powerful than weapons like the laser sword and flame saber. However, Johansson did not pay it much attention. Upon noticing the unfamiliar mech, he shifted his attention elsewhere and flew a few meters to the side to avoid impact. With the high rate of mech ownership these days, and lack of any substantial restrictions by the government on mech designs, it is not uncommon to see all sorts of odd mech designs. Johansson had once seen a mech modeled from a millennia-old container used as a toilet. It was rumored to have a strange name, Potty. The owner of the mech was also said to be a toilet seat hobbyist. However, the unimaginative Johansson had no idea how a quadrupedal ungulate and a roundish toilet seat could be combined. However, the unimaginative. Compared to that, this blue and white mech seemed absolutely normal. Perhaps the owner of this mech was only an enthusiast of archaic weaponry, thought Johansson. Johansson was completely absorbed by the blue and white mech's archaic-looking lance to notice that the mech was actually flying much faster than an average mech. However, even if he did notice it, he would probably not give it much thought, since the cosmic flare was incredibly fast. The other party did not seem to notice his presence, as it did not move strangely. Johansson was already focusing entirely on the photon processor's various scan results, looking desperately for the F-58. Everything seemed to proceed the same, as every time he had to evade the mechs that failed to detect the cosmic flare. The blue and white mech speed did not change, flying at high speed towards Johansson. However, Johansson's earlier maneuver a few meters to the side avoided the possibility of impact under normal circumstances. The two mechs closed in, and the blue and white mech's archaic lance seemed to have adjusted slightly in the mech's grip, like an unintentional movement. Johansson was still focused on the photon processor scans. As the distance between the two mechs reduced to less than 100 meters, Johansson finally shifted his attention to the other mech. Of course, he was only preventing an accident from happening, however slight the chance was. As he inadvertently scanned the approaching mech, Johansson suddenly had a little premonition and felt that something was off. However, he could not make much out of it, only that it made him extremely uncomfortable, even though everything seemed to be normal. The 100-meter range took less than a second to cover for the mechs traveling beyond Mach 5. The two mechs were about to pass by each other, seemingly without incident. Abruptly, a chilling gleam closed in on Johansson. Almost simultaneously, the cosmic flare's alarm for attacks roared to life. Johansson had his soul rocked to its core as he reflexively lifted his left hand to block the attack with his plasma shield and retreated backwards at the same time. Too fast. That was Johansson's only thought. The cosmic flare's plasma shield was only half lifted before the gleaming tip of the archaic lance breached past his mech's left arm. The cosmic flare was determinedly retreating, but switching the engines from the original floating mode to maximum speed required a finite time span. While the cosmic flare could still manage this quickly and negligibly under normal circumstances, the millisecond delay was fatal in the current encounter. The dampened sound of a mech being punctured through was unfamiliar. The strong sense of splitting apart put Johansson's mind to a halt and immediately engulfed him completely in pain, almost suffocating him. Ironically, the pause in thought gave him a short window of extreme clarity. A nimble figure flitted through his mind, getting clearer and clearer. He could not help but reach out with his bloody hands, wishing to embrace the figure that was all the dreams that he had worked hard for all this time. Fatigue gradually overcame him as he coughed out blood from his mouth. His outreaching hands were getting heavier, and slowly, that unforgettable figure began to dissolve into a mist as his vitality gradually dimmed and vanished. Underscore 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 underscore. At the base's defense center, someone was seen running hastily towards it. Before he even cleared the security room, the person shouted with panic, "Bad news, someone's infiltrated the base." The defense center's inhabitants exchanged looks amongst themselves and began to laugh. One of them, the leader, grinned. "Old Lee, that's such a lame joke, someone infiltrated the base." "Huh." Old Lee continued anxiously, "It's for real this time, someone really infiltrated the base, even." Another one of them laughed, interrupting him, and spoke in a mocking tone, "Oh, it's for real this time." He even emphasized on the this time and, coupled with his silly expression, invited another round of laughter from the rest of his coworkers. Old Lee was blushing from his nerves. "It's true, it's..." One of the kinder members could not stand to see Old Lee in such distress, and spoke up, Old Lee, your joke really wasn't top-notch. You see, our security systems are doing fine, absolutely normal. If someone infiltrated the base, would it be so quiet on our side? Ho, even if you don't trust us, surely you trust the G family's photon processor security system." The same person dragged Old Lee by the arm, ready to send him out, and to get him out of his predicament. Suddenly, a massive explosion was heard, and everyone froze. Yi Chong satisfyingly watched as Johansson's mech exploded right before his eyes. Under such circumstances, the probability of the mech's pilot surviving was almost certainly zero. With Johansson no more, and the base still ignorant of him, Yi Chong immediately thought of the red and silver mech at the lowest level of the basement. Like and subscribe.